All right, welcome back, everybody. It's going to be a big week for us in this particular class because we are getting into a lot greater depth with those articles that we've been going through. And hopefully, we're going to be able to parse out a lot of the stuff covered in those resources that you've obtained, maybe just through a lot of grinding, but also hopefully through the last module that we went through where we talked about how to be better researchers and hopefully you had the time to go through some of the resources sorry that were provided for you in that lecture. What are we going to be doing that's really big this particular time? We're going to be looking at those journal articles that you found 2 modules ago and finally breaking them down, really going into depth about what they were trying to address, how they did it, whether or not you can fit your ideas that you have into the grand scheme of those resources. So if you go into the assignments tab for this class, what you'll see here is a prompt asking you to look at least 4 of the articles that you're planning on using for this project, maybe a couple more if you really want to round things out. Now, that minimum of 4 requirements really is kind of a floor for this particular project. It's definitely way fewer resources than you'll need to use for your senior thesis, where we're talking somewhere around a dozen plus resources that most people use for those. And it's not even necessarily a good number to use for this particular assignment, where I often suggest to people that they have 5, 6, 7 different resources that they can use so they make sure that they're speaking about their topic in a more holistic way, not just focusing in on a few limited things. For this assignment, we're going to set it at 4 as the requirement for you to look for articles that really do relate to what it is that you're looking for. If you find some articles that you thought were good and after reading them, recognize it really doesn't relate to your topic, I would strongly suggest so you have the ability to be more successful in the future assignments that you go out and find some additional articles that maybe fit what it is that you're planning to do for your project a little bit better. But just as a reminder of how to find those articles, what I strongly suggest you do for this class is going into the A to Z database on our library, going into our psychology research article uh, our database. And once you get to psych articles, sorry, dang it. Once you get to psych articles through the same path that you took, hopefully to find the articles in the first place, you are going to find at least 4 journal articles for this that are in depth and cover things that relate to what it is you're looking for. Let's just come up with an example of one. I think the topic we looked for was depression and friend making. Just say friend making. See how that pops up. Oh, that's even a good search. I think we saw that one last time. Behaviorally inhibited. Okay, cool. It's in a small cell. Okay, so let's say we find this article. It says, "Can behaviorally inhibited preschoolers make friends?" You decide, hey, this looks like it could relate to what it is that I'm looking for. So you look in the access options. Yeah, and hopefully, of course, don't do that to me. That's not good. Sorry. It's always fun to do these on the fly. There we go. Okay, perfect. All right, so we've got the full article. That's here from Developmental Psychology, published in 2024, so really new ones. Can behaviorally inhibited preschoolers make friends? Very specific topic. Pretty neat. Actually, might even read this one sometime down the road because it seems like a fun topic. What you'll see when you see this article is, well, actually pretty indicative of what you'll come across in most journal articles. Most of them are around 10 to 20 pages long. Most of them have a pretty detailed introduction, like this one. You look down at the bottom of this, you'll see a reference page after around 10 pages of literature. That's 1, 2, 3 pages long. If you want to count the resources, you see around probably 30, 40 resources here. That's pretty indicative of what you'll come across once you start reading these articles. Actually, it's 50 resources for this one. Pretty indicative of what you'll see come across with these good research articles. You see all the components of this paper a paper that will be the same as your paper when you submit your final version of a paper later. Now, your paper probably won't be this long or this detailed, but you're building toward that. That's the whole goal. So what are we doing here today then when it comes to those summaries? Well, the reason why I was having us go through this and find these journal articles is I want to walk you through how you probably need to break these down so you can summarize them correctly and get full credit for these research article assignments. If you look at these articles, what you'll see is first an abstract. Now, this is not the entire paper. Sometimes students accidentally assume that this little blurb right here is the entire paper. No, just as a reminder in case you've forgotten it since your methods class, the abstracts are very quick summaries of everything that was done within the paper, but it is certainly not the equivalence of the other 10 pages of writing that you see later on. So you got the abstract first. And then you get into an introduction. Now, these introductions in these articles are usually going to have multiple sections within them. It's usually because most journal articles that you're going to come across have different studies that are conducted. A couple of them will maybe have just one thing that was conducted and they're writing an article on that. Most of them, or if we're looking at today's journal articles, unless it's a very specific type of publication, will have multiple studies incorporated within the article so they can try to address a topic from multiple perspectives. It's not required for you for this paper or your senior thesis. You really are just going to be writing a paper on one topic, which is why it's going to be significantly more condensed than this one. What you can see as you're going through these ones that you're going to be reading is they address, usually in the introduction, a lot of stuff. Now, when you're coming up with your summary, this introduction is usually very helpful. It goes over the idea, it contextualizes stuff, it ties things together, sort of lays out the path of what the researcher is going to explore. As a new reader, this is usually one of the most useful sections out there. After you get through that introduction, you'll run into the methods section, which is broken up into subsections, just like you'll have for your own paper. You see how they've got different, interesting, the different measures that they're using, subjects that they have, or what they're called participants in this one. And they even, which is rare, describe the data analysis that they're going to be doing. Probably because, yes, it's a much more complicated analysis than some of the other ones that you might run across as you're progressing. And even it has a little bit on, oh, well, interesting. Okay. Saying that, there's a way to contact them just in case you have questions about their research. I've never seen that. Maybe that's a new thing that I'm just becoming familiarized with. But anyway, in this methods section, you see a very laid out description of exactly what the researchers did and just kind of why they did the things that they did. Sometimes, as a new reader, this takes a long time to kind of get through. And some of the stuff that they're going to be talking about in this might be a little bit beyond your level of comprehension, either because they're just using really complex verbiage. More often than not, they're just talking about specific tools and ideas and approaches you've maybe never come across. And don't sweat that component of it. Honestly, even some top graduate students, when they read papers, have to pause and do a lit review or search on the methodology or the terms that the person is covering. This is some complex stuff, oftentimes, when people write these very involved research articles. But what you can do for now when going through these sections is try to get the gist of what's being covered within this method section. How are they going about tackling what they're doing? And maybe even could raise some ideas of how you might go about tackling what you're going to do in your research project, especially if the research that you're reading about is very linked to or very strongly linked to what it is you will be looking at. Once you get through that section, you're going to get down to probably the toughest section for most students to digest as they're getting new to these, the results section. They talk about very specific effects. They're presenting them in a very organized way that's following something called APA formatting. I'm guessing you've gone through this. We're going to go through that again a little bit later. You're going to need to make sure you look up APA formatting when you write your reference page for this, which you already did actually when you found the first references, but you have to kind of remind yourself on that. And they present all of these very specific data points and they describe them in very specific ways. Make sure that they're following APA format. This is great for established researchers who know what they're reading and what they're looking at. But as a new student, I, I need to warn you, this is probably one of the toughest things for people to process. There's a lot of terminology that you probably never encountered. The presentation might be completely new, so it takes time to digest. So you want to give yourself a substantial amount of time to go through these results sections and try to get as much as you can from it. Then after that, you can pivot to the discussion section, which usually takes what it was that they described in the results section and sort of spins it into something that's more understandable and ties it to other research. Again, as a newer student, this is kind of the stuff that you tend to lean on a little bit more than the results section. That will transition as you become more and more acclimated to these research articles. For this particular class, it's perfectly okay for you to put a little bit more time in trying to understand stuff by reading through these discussion sections. Sometimes they also have conclusion sections if it's multiple studies that were done. And from doing that, hopefully you can get the gist of how the person thinks their research fits into the grand scheme of things. Once you've gone through this for each article, you should be able to write up a quick summary of the article and move on to the next one. Now, some of you might be thinking in your heads, okay, how long is this going to take? This is probably one of the most involved assignments for the class. I have to write a whole paper, so we can't say that this is necessarily the most involved section. Oftentimes people will spend more time on those papers versus these lit reviews, but if we're talking about a close second, this one's there. If you're doing your job correctly, you're really digging through this stuff in the amount of depth that you're supposed to be digging through it in. So I encourage you, because this does take so much time and effort, to get started on this right away. You will need 4 resources. You can use the ones that you already found in the original lit review without having to actually summarize them. Again, if you want to go up on that number, it's totally okay. And in fact, it's strongly encouraged if you don't think those articles really relate to your topic well enough for you to use those articles later on. Because if you don't do it now, you're going to do it later, and well, it's just going to have to kind of go back to the drawing board really to progress at that point in time. So give yourself enough time to go through these 4 articles. Within them, you're going to include that reference page again that you came up with before and describe the depth of each of the different articles that you're using. This one's for 15 points, which is a decent amount of points for your final grade. As you don't want to slack off on this one because this one is something that can push up or sort of drag down your grade. If you've got questions about anything that you come across as you're reading these articles, like always, feel free to reach out to me so you can have a discussion about what they're trying to say with these things or kind of how you're supposed to describe this particular material. But I do need to warn you in advance again that this is a slog. It's going to take some effort. So you do not want to put this off until the last day because if you try to do that, this is going to feel like an impossible task. I mean, graduate students who have gone through hundreds of articles will often cap themselves at maybe 2 articles a day when they're trying to understand this stuff in full, because there is a lot of things within it. It takes a lot of time to be diligent about trying to understand this stuff. And if you start going through more than 2 articles a day, even though you can read the words, the comprehension starts to drop. So, don't press yourself on this. Don't beat yourself up if you can't understand this stuff perfectly in the beginning. But again, we're trying to build skills here with this. So if you can go through these and you can summarize them, you can be in a better position to write your paper for this class. You're going to be in a better position to do your senior thesis. And honestly, which most of you are probably headed towards, you're going to be better prepared to be successful in any graduate program or later thing that involves these research articles that you might come across in the future. So I wish you the best of luck with this. Reach out again if you need any help. But for today, I think we've covered everything we need. So take care, all, and I will hopefully see you all pretty soon. And I look forward to grading your posts. Take care.